Wasima?
I'm not sure, member. One of the members' mics was on. Let's mute all of them.
The Health Secretary stresses the importance.
Please, members, if you can, everybody who is on the platform, if you can mute your microphones and then also turn off your camera. I just want to ascertain with regards to all our members, if you can introduce yourselves for the record, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson Regan Allen.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairperson Khalid Sayed. Morning, Member Allen.
Good afternoon, Member Makamba Boja.
Good afternoon, Ferlin Christians.
Good afternoon, Kilian Postman.
Good afternoon, Mesuli Kama.
Thank you. Minister, are you on the platform?
Yes, Chair, I am.
Good afternoon. I'm taking the introductions of yourself and the department. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Debbie Schaefer, Provincial Minister of Education, Western Cape. Can I ask my officials to introduce themselves, please?
Chairperson Leon Eli, DDG Corporate Services and the CFO. Thank you.
Chairperson Matthijs Cronje, Acting Chief Director, Education.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Debbie Pillay, Director, Service Benefits.
Chair, that looks like all for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. Somebody else has joined. Okay, then I just want to extend a welcome to the media who is also on the platform and those that are following us via YouTube. Mr. Eli, you are doing the presentation, right, sir?
That's correct, Chairperson.
Okay, Mr. Eli, I'm not going to go into a debate around this. I just want to understand, let the committee understand why we only received the presentations yesterday.
Apologies for that, Chairperson. Obviously, Chair, as you know, my staff is working from home, and there are obviously some challenges with us trying to obtain information around the questions that was posed by the standing committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then, Mr. Eli, our presentation today is on the absenteeism and the sick leave rates or patterns of teachers at schools within our province, and then the learner-teacher ratio at schools in the province. Members, I'm going to let the department do both presentations, and then thereafter we will pose questions. Minister, can I give you an opportunity just as an introduction?
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, I think it will be easier. We have been given the questions in advance. Thank you for that. Echo Mr. Eli's apologies. We are working under extraordinary circumstances at the moment. But I think it will be easier if we go through the presentation and then any questions, I'll be happy to answer that afterwards, if that's fine with you, Chair.
Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister.
Chair.
Somebody said Chair. Yes, please. Please introduce yourself or say who you are.
Chair, it's Member Makamba Boja.
Yeah.
Chair, I just need to get clarity on the issue of the agenda. The agenda currently is actually, it's not, I don't think we should be debating such kind of agendas at this particular point in time. We are faced with COVID-19 pandemic. Our agenda should be prioritizing education and this coronavirus thing and other matters that are around the COVID-19 and education. I don't think we should be sitting here discussing the absenteeism of the high absenteeism and the education in this other agenda. And number two, the fact that we received the what you call it, the presentation only last night. Some of us, I had no opportunity to actually look at the agenda. I mean, at the presentation. So I have no knowledge. I have nothing to say. I cannot even be fruitful in this discussion. That's number two. So my first point is that I think in terms of the agenda, we should look at prioritizing what is currently at hand, which is COVID-19 and education, other than dwelling on the issues of absenteeism that is not a priority at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Makamba Bocha. There is a ad hoc committee that was called to life to look at anything pertaining to, in terms of all our portfolios in Parliament, pertaining to what happens in that spheres regarding the COVID-19 disaster that we are in. So the ad hoc committee is there, has been brought to life for that. The Standing Committee Education, however, proceeds with its program as we have set it together at the beginning of the year. So I take your point. I note you, but there is an ad hoc committee that deals with that COVID-19 disaster management issues pertaining to education. With regards to the presentation, we are all in the same boat. We have all received it yesterday, and I have had time to look at the presentation, but Mr. Eli is going to take us through the presentation page by page. So as he goes along, we shall make our notes and then we will pose our questions accordingly. If you do not have questions after the presentation, after Mr. Eli has finished, you can pose your questions via the procedural officer.
Chair, thank you, Chair. Can I just respond on your first response? I understand the second.
Member Makamba Bocha, I'm not going to open this debate now. We can have it after the presentation is done and after the department has left and the committee does its in-house work. With that said, Mr. Eli, over to you.
Chairperson, sorry, Chairperson. It's Brian Schroeder speaking.
Good afternoon, SG.
Will you allow me a sec, please? Just a second.
Is that pertaining to the fact that we have received the presentation only yesterday? Because Mr. Eli has alluded to that already.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. It is, first of all, good afternoon. My apologies for joining late. Also, just my apologies that I might break away during the meeting because we do need to get correspondence to schools urgently today, hence my apology. But I want to also augment just a comment on the presentation yesterday. We also augmented it overnight. So the presentation that Mr. Eli is speaking to will also have slight variances to the one that you had. We will circulate that again later. It's not substantively different, but there is a little bit of additional information I think that can be of value to the committee. So if you'll allow it, he'll speak to that, and then we will circulate the slight amendment. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, SG. With that said, Mr. Eli.
Thank you, Chairperson. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, Mr. Eli, we can.
Okay, thank you. I will go forth then. So, Chairperson, the committees ask us to respond to particular two questions, and that's just in terms of the absenteeism and sick leave patterns of teachers at schools. And then the second one is around the learner-teacher ratios at schools in the province. And then if we go to the Chairperson, if you allow me, the teacher absenteeism and sick leave patterns, because I think it's a concern that's been expressed when the committee normally has engagement with us around the annual report, and there were issues that was raised there as well in this regard. So if we just go through that, just to say that teacher absenteeism rate is between 4 and 5% per annum in the Western Cape. I've been made to believe in other provinces it's higher than this, but in our particular case, it's between 4 and 5% per annum in the Western Cape. Then also in terms of just being proactive around teacher absenteeism, because as you know, when a teacher is absent, there is learners sitting in a classroom, and obviously in that particular situation, we need to have a policy position around that as well. So currently, we do provide substitutes where teachers are absent if they are absent for more than 15 working days. This is obviously in terms of also the affordability of the department to provide that particular substitute. And then also, again, just in terms of the second point, the teacher absenteeism is measured by the number of leave days taken, divided by the number of teachers times the actual teaching working hours days that was lost, obviously, as well. So that's just in terms of the introduction around these particular matters, and just in terms of the policy that we are following at the moment. If I can go on. And teacher absenteeism risk for the Western Cape, currently it's I would say low to medium, but we are monitoring it. So just to say, in terms of the system we have in place, teacher attendance is captured and monitored on a daily basis through the teacher attendance model on the people management practices system. This is an electronic system that school principals every morning in normal, let me just qualify that, in normal operations, when schools are operating like normal, that they normally would attend to. So they will complete the teaching attendance at a particular school. So the default setting on the particular program is that we say that teachers are absent, and in the school principal will have to go into the system, log in, and then indicate to the department whether a teacher is then present or not. And that is all electronic, and that comes to us at head office. But the second manager and the relevant district officers also have access to that particular report as well. Sorry, if I can just say there.
Mr. Eli?
Mr. Eli, just unmute your mic. You've muted yourself, I think.
Mr. Eli, we've lost you.
Yeah, I think we've lost him entirely. I think he's slowly.
Apologies.
Oh, he's back. He's back.
He's back.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Eli.
Apologies
Continue.
for that, Chair. I was
Yeah.
I was kicked off the system just now.
Oh, okay. Apologies for that. Can you continue?
Seems he's been kicked off again, Chair.
I'm just talking to IT now. SG?
Apologies, Chair. I'm back.
Okay. Okay, I hope you're here to stay now, Mr. Eli.
Yeah, there's Chairperson, unfortunately, there are other meetings happening at the same time as well. So people are trying to log me into other meetings as well, unfortunately. But Chair, if we can carry forth. So on the next slide, what we've tried to do is to try and illustrate over a period of time how, as the department, in terms of the leave cycle, how we've tried to manage leave over a period of time. As you know, leave is quite problematic in our department, and we've tried to illustrate with this particular slide presentation. People are trying to log me. Pardon? Over the period of time, we've tried to, with more stringent controls, etc., and monitoring aspects, again, like what we mentioned previously around the leave management system that we have in place, that came into being over the past 3 or 4 or 5 years. We've managed over time to bring the trend down. Obviously, that doesn't mean that we out of the woods around a leave. So this is just trying to give an illustration over time what's happening with the leave periods as well. Leave cycles are obviously over a 3-year period, and we've tried to illustrate over this particular years what's been happening as well. Just to note that for the year 2021, that is still obviously coming, but we've just tried to group it in a particular leave periods as well. So just to note that point as well. Again, just the last point there. Currently we have the highest maternity leave category is maternity leave, and that's because of the composition of our workforce, and that's maternity leave is allowed in terms of the conditions of service, and therefore it's quite acceptable in terms of that. But just in terms of the illustration, in terms of category, why that is so. And then obviously, just to illustrate here again, there are other types of leave that's taken at the moment, and that is to the depression. As you can see, that although it's come down, it's still an issue for us. There are obviously people that obviously have heart conditions, and then also neurological conditions as well, which obviously it's other categories, which has also come down over the period. And then obviously there's people that normally have surgical operations that's also impacted here, that in the way we record the leave types as well, Chair. Then if I can then move on to the following slide, Chair, this is what the issue referred to. We've just added this particular slide for that gives you again the same information in a slightly different format, and it basically highlights again the same issues that I've highlighted previously. So you can just see in terms of the categories again here. The previous slide was relating to the leave cycle, and I just extracted a particular category here. We've taken the category itself and then tried to extract it and extrapolate it for the information of the committee. So here you can actually see the trends in terms of those particular categories. And on this slide, you can see the depression obviously over time has increased quite substantially, and neurological related illnesses have also taken off as well over that particular period. Obviously, Chair, this is obviously very concerning for us, and obviously we will monitor that particular aspect. The way we try to manage these particular aspects, especially around depression, we've got the employer wellness service provider in place where we refer, especially our educators, where they can have a free service that they consult with these particular service provider who's got the particular expertise at hand in terms of trying to deal with some of these issues, in terms of trying to manage it down. Obviously, that's got its own consequences. What we've also seen is that, especially our educators, which is a big bulk of our workforce, also like to go to their own service providers. I think it's got to do with the issue of trust and confidentiality as well. So I just wanted to highlight that again, Chair, in terms of employment wellness program, and it just outlines. We have a toll-free number where employers can go to in terms of phoning for assistance, and there we provide, just in terms of the bottom categories there, we provide counselling for family challenges, financial advice, health and wellness, HIV and AIDS, and work and life support. There's other aspects that I can also assist with around personal budgeting, relationships, stress management, especially that one, stress management. Also substance abuse, if some of our members require particular guidance in that regard. And then also trauma and legal advice in that regard as well. So there are various categories that they can contact our employee or health and employee wellness as well. This is an outsourced service, so and it's also a provincial service as well. So they do have the particular expertise. It's managed by Metropolitan Health. So they have the particular experts in place that can assist our particular staff members with their particular conditions or if advice is required, they can assist our employees in that regard as well. Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if you want to stop here for questions or we want us to go on to the second presentation as well. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Eli, thank you very much. As per agreed that we will do both presentations and thereafter we will pose questions. So if you can continue, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will then go on to the second presentation. This presentation has got to do with the status of learner-teacher ratios, as requested by the Standing Committee, the status in this province as well. So, if we can start off, Chair, obviously, again, the basket of posts that we have in this department, the number of posts that we can afford is obviously linked to our budget. And that we consult every year around June and July with the unions, so that we go through a particular process in terms of consultation to say to the unions, the labour unions, or in this particular case, the teacher unions, exactly how many posts we can afford. And we also go into the aspect around the learner-educator ratios. We look at all those type of things. Yeah, not to go into further to that particular, because that whole exercise itself is quite a technical exercise as well. Then, in terms of that consideration, as far as factors are concerned, we look at the effect that the post establishment will have on the employment security of educators. That basically deals with the fact whether we're increasing the basket or not. And then also in that particular case, how many substitutes we can afford, and contract educators as well we can afford in that regard. Then we also, in terms of the basket, or in terms of the affordability of the basket post, we also look at redress, whether we can apply redress or not. For the past number of years, along probably 10 years, we've always applied the redress policy as promulgated by National Department of Education, which is DBE. And then also in terms of consideration, we look at the personnel and non-personnel as well, and also the division between educators and non-educators as well. Just to say for the record that education ratio is quite high compared to non-educators, because your non-educators, in terms of value and in terms of funding, they normally the cost per person there is normally less compared with educators. And then we also look at the conditions of service. That's point 5. We look at the conditions of employment as well. What normally happens there, Chair, as at a national level, there are negotiations around conditions of service with the Department of Basic Education and DPSA around conditions. There's salary increase, etc., and so forth. But that, again, if that is negotiated at the national level, it then may or may not have an impact on the number of additional posts that we can afford, that we can put into the basket, based on the number of learners that we expect to come into the system in the following year. We always plan, Chair, just for the record, we always plan for the next school year. So for this year, for example, we will plan in terms of personnel. We will plan for the 2021 school years in terms of that particular aspect. Then, just Chair, I think this slide is just trying to present the learner growth that we've had over the number of years as well. Since 2013, I think all members in the committees know that we annually we have challenges around the placement of learners, and also then trying to deal with the additional growth that we normally have in the system. So this slide presentation just says to us that over the number of years we've experienced exponential growth in the province around learner growth. Part of that is obviously normal population growth. The other part of that is obviously the preference by learners and people in other provinces to come to the Western Cape. I think we all know the economic growth of the Western Cape is the second highest in the country, and therefore thus people will prefer to come to this province to seek employment as well. And they then obviously bring their learners with, or their children with as well. That is obviously a challenge that we are dealing with on an ongoing basis as well. Then what we're trying to illustrate here, again, Chair, just based on affordability, over time, compare with the previous slide, you've seen that we've tried to grow the basket but not at the rate that we would obviously I've liked to have grown the basket. That obviously does have a direct impact then on the learner-educator ratio as well. And I think that the two presentations are trying to illustrate in terms of the steep curve and in terms of the flatter curve, what we're trying over the last number of years to try and grow our basket of posts for educators especially. Then this particular slide, I think we've sent a similar slide to your chair last night, but this slide is a bit more illustrative of what we're trying to say here. But if you take the previous two slides, then this is what we are saying here. We're saying that for the year 2020, we have a backlog of what we have, which is the fourth column there. We have a cumulative shortfall in terms of the basket sorry, not this one. Yeah, this is just to say that we are trying to grow the basket, but we have a cumulative backlog of basket of posts that we've inherited over, or that we've tried to manage over time as well, to try and keep the learner-educator ratio the same, or try to take off pressure off the system where we can. Then if we go to our average learner-educator ratios, just to say here that these are obviously systemic ratios. It looks at the system overall, and therefore at particular schools you might get differences compared to the ratios we're disclosing here, because the school's timetabling or the infrastructure might be a limiting factor at some of our schools. So for example, at the secondary school since 2014, our ratios used to be at 1:33 for 33.9 for every teacher. At 2020, the current year 2020, we have a learner-educator ratio of 1:36.4. So there's definitely been an increase over that particular period, and then the same hold true for the primary schools as well. And those two together, Chair, gives you a systemic ratio for the province as a whole. So what you can see from here, obviously, our primary schools are facing slightly more pressure compared to the secondary schools as well. Also remember, with the secondary schools, you have the aspect around subject choices that can influence that particular ratio as far as secondary schools are concerned. Primary schools obviously have the same ratio, but again, with primary schools, as I said previously, you might have a challenge around classroom accommodation and also the size of the classroom itself, because in some schools, especially with schools that have been built in earlier years, their classroom accommodation and space is sometimes smaller compared to the newer classrooms that's got a bigger physical space to house learners as well. So those are all the underlying issues that affects a ratio at a particular school as well, Chair. Thank you. So if I can go on to the next slide. So, Chair, just in terms of transparency again, we're trying to illustrate what the ratios are per district based on the average teacher learner educator ratios, and also how we allocated the post to those particular districts as well. Chair, this is now across the board. It's not referring to any quintiles or anything else. It just tells you what the average ratio is per district. Some of our bigger districts, like East and North and South, these are bigger districts, and they obviously have slightly worse ratios compared to some of our smaller districts, which is like Overberg and West Coast as well, and even ECK as well. These are some of our relatively smaller districts compared with the other ones as well. And also here you can see your rural districts as well. So which is basically your Eden and Central Karoo, your West Coast, Overberg and Cape Winelands. Those are your rural schools where those schools and the population is a bit more sparse. And some of those schools obviously will require learner transport schemes to get the learners to those schools. Whereas your metros, you have the aspect around what we call commuter schools, where learners are traveling to particular schools, schools of choice as well. Then, Chair, just in terms of here we're trying to break it up into primary schools and to secondary schools. I think it's just a bit more transparency there, but I think the same point holds in terms of the overall ratios we're giving to the committee for the primary schools and the high schools. I'm not going to spend time on this particular slide presentation as well. Then what we've done is also, Chair, we've given you a breakdown between fee-paying schools and no-fee schools. Because I think the question always comes up around fee-paying schools, but again, this illustrates of fair distribution between fee-paying schools and no-fee schools as well, given the fact that we do apply a redress policy again. Obviously, Chair, just to note that in some cases, fee-paying schools obviously supplement that with their own SGB posts as well. But again, in terms of the fair distribution from the bottom side, we try as far as possible to distribute the number of posts to all schools on a fairly equitable basis as well. Then, Chair, just in terms of closing and wrapping up, as far as my presentation is concerned, what we're saying is 695 additional posts have been allocated to schools to support learner growth and also for the accommodation of unplaced learners and in curriculum support as well. Again, just to re-emphasize again what I said previously, a pro-poor approach is followed in terms of allocation of additional posts. Again, 64% of our posts have been allocated to no-fee schools and 36% to fee-paying schools as well. In total, 331 schools were supported with additional posts. And then challenges we face is teacher basket posts for 2020 was already fully utilized. And then there's still some schools that still experiencing additional need for posts as well, given the growth they've experienced as well. So, Chair, that is in terms of my wrap-up. And therefore, I'll ask the SG and the Minister if they have additional comments to make in terms of the presentation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eli. Minister?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, just a few issues. Initially on the leave management, I must say I am very pleased with the improvements that have been made. It was quite honestly most unsatisfactory previously, where we really didn't have a good handle on the information, and often we'd find out that leave forms had been kept at schools and people's desks and so on. So I'm really pleased that we have improved on that. Mr. Eli must take the credit for that. I think obviously the employee wellness issue is going to become even more important now, given what we're currently going through. So we need to make sure that we ramp that up as well. It's also clear that the number of posts is not nearly sufficient for what we need, and we're like a stuck record on that issue. But we are trying to scrape together as many posts as we possibly can. We also know, of course, that the ratios that are given there are not exactly what they are in some particular classrooms, because that includes very often principals who don't take a full teaching load. So we really are, if we considering now going back to school, it's vitally important that we must get additional funding from National Treasury for substitute teachers in the event of any of them getting sick. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. SG, anything you would want to add?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing from my side at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Eli, thank you very much for the presentations then. Members, I'm going to open up now for questions. We have enough time at our disposal to do the question and answer session. Minister, I just note that you will leave after some time, and the SG has also indicated that he will leave. Hey, so we're going to take, excuse me?
2 o'clock, please. Thank you.
Okay. So members, those questions that you would want the minister's response on, let's dig into that first, or the SG, and then thereafter we will do the questions with Mr. Eli. So I'm going to open up the round. I'm going to allow, I'm going to do it, members, on the same principle as we do the ad hoc committee. a few minutes disposed to a party, and then we'll take it round per round like that. I trust that this would be in order with all of you.
Chairperson, may I just ask something?
Yes, sure, Minister.
Would you mind doing the questions to the SG first? I know he's got some extremely pressing issues he has to attend to that are for once more pressing than mine. So I'm happy to wait a second if that's okay.
Thank you. That is okay, Minister. We will then post to the SG. And I'm taking it on the principle as just discussed with you or just presented to you. So I'm noting the DA. And I'm
Chair, I was
giving
just
you 4
going,
minutes.
Chair,
4
Chair
minutes.
Brian Schroeder, sorry for interrupting you. I know you can't see my hand wave at you. I was just going to say, I'm sure there are no questions to me, and Mr. Eli can answer all of them that comes, but I will listen in the beginning. Thank you.
Okay, SG. 4 minutes, first round, each party.
Chairperson, Gillian Postman here.
Sure, go ahead.
Chair, just on the slide around patterns in leave, if Mr. Eli can perhaps expand on the column that says operations related, and maybe let us know whether that includes violence against teachers at schools by students. And then
yeah, I think you go first on this one, and then I'll come in immediately after you. Yeah, because I've got a lot of questions. Yeah.
Member said that I think it's a private conversation that we're hearing now between you and somebody else. Member Gillian is still on the floor, per se. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't put on mute. Apologies.
Thank you, Chair. So my first question is around just an expansion on what is meant by operations related and whether that includes violence against teachers. And then the second question is around depression, which I note is quite high in 2018. And I wanted to find out, based on the sort of data available, how many people opted for employee health and wellness support, and how is that being tracked in terms of ensuring that teachers are returned to optimal health? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. There's still a few minutes
Chairperson
left.
Regan Allen.
Yes. Yeah, sure. Go
I
ahead.
believe we still have a minute or two.
Go ahead, Member Allen.
I am partly covered by Member Bosman's questions, and I also want to refer to the slide regarding the patterns in leave. If we can get a breakdown regarding the various categories, for example, depression per quintile. For example, in my head, I can see that if we are able to establish, say, the top 10 schools that is featuring high in that regard, and then what is being done in a targeted way for those schools, for example. I always consider one particular matter I know about, where an amazing teacher had to transfer schools for her own mental health in order for her to then exercise her gifting of being a teacher. So I want to see if we have a breakdown per quintile, and if we have like the top 10 categories or top 10 areas that has been affected. But I'm also interested, Chairperson, the teacher absenteeism rate, it is stated it is between 4 and 5% per annum. And then it was alluded to the fact that substitute teachers are provided when teachers are absent for 15 days or more. Where do these substitute teachers comes from, and what is, because it's almost like trying to see how many days do we lose out, if that makes sense to the SG or to the Minister, to say that we are losing X amount of days before the substitute teacher comes on board, because then people need to catch up again. I'm not sure if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. I now note the ANC. Member Sayed, you can practice now, put in practice what you just spoke about.
I'm giving over to Member Karma, as I indicated. He can ask for now. I don't have really issues for the Minister and for the SG at this point.
Member Karma.
No, thanks. Thank you very much, Chair. Let me welcome the presentation. I think two of my questions were were asked already. I think one was about the depression. I wanted to understand your model, because the number, as Member Killian has said, it looks quite high for 2018. Now, what I wanted to check is what is our response as a department to that, as opposed to waiting for the individual teacher to ask for the employee health and wellness program. The other question I have, Chair, and apologies if it was explained when I lost sound, but the question is on I think you spoke about substitute teachers. Now, I wanted to just understand the model around it. Member Regan has asked in terms of the days. Does it not affect how many days do we lose? Is it only at the 15th day that we're able to consider the issue of the substitute teacher? Thanks, Chair.
No comrades, Member Kama. Member Christians?
It's me, Chair.
Member Makamba Bocha?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I have a comment and a question. My comment is based on my first inquiry on the issue of the agenda. I think as a committee, because you must remember that not all of us are in that ad hoc committee. And I think as a committee, we are at least entitled to know what are the discussions held by the ad hoc committee pertaining to education. As a committee, we need to be abreast of what is happening. At the moment, I have no knowledge of what is happening. Hence, I indicated that I think it would be best if we have these discussions, we also collaborate what has been discussed in the ad hoc committee, so that we're all in the same page in terms of what is happening. And my question is on the issue of the slide that was illustrating the sick leave used per cycle by illness type, of which I think most of the members have actually posed questions on the issue of depression, which is very high. So I wanted the department to actually zoom into getting like a breakdown in getting to the causes of the depression. They must break it down and zoom in terms of the religion, and also quanta level, where is it actually happening, so that we are able to know as the committee where are the areas where the department needs to focus on. I think that's my question, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member
Chairperson.
Makamba Bocha. Member Christians.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Just, I want to know when teachers, Mr. Ela has mentioned, when teachers are absent, there's a teachers management system, I think it is, to say when teachers are absent, when does it actually get to the HQ? When does it get to the HOD, if it gets there, to see that there is problems when it comes to absenteeism of the teachers? How long does it take to get to the relevant role players? Another question, Chair, and everybody spoke about depression, but there's also heart disease. Is it because 6,462? Is that also looked at, the heart disease? Because I know depression on 37,003, but also, you know, the heart disease, is that also taken care of? Another question that also that's important, I think I also saw when we came to the ratios, the Metro East has got the highest when it comes to the ratios, the highest number of learners to teachers. And if I can recall correctly, your problem area is the Metro East when it comes to pass rate. Is the department doing something to assist there? Because we know in certain areas, the school fee paying schools can create and have money for SGB posts, but in the Metro East, they must just give us some indication there. What are they doing? Because I know there's certain schools struggling there. Chair, just maybe a last question is, and I know the Minister said that National Treasury, they need more money for teachers. But these, as the Minister also said, these ratios, you know, I've been to a school in Elsies River just before the lockdown, and principals is really saying, you know, we cannot teach and run a school because, you know, all the responsibilities with the headmaster to make sure that everything runs smoothly. He does not have the time, he says, to go and still teach, but he is calculated in when it comes to these ratios. When can the department just explain to me? The headmasters, principals are saying there's so much expected of running a school. How is it possible that they are also calculated when it comes to the ratios? So thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Are there of the questions that you would want to respond to before we before you leave us?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll kick off. I mean, all of these Mr. Eli can deal with very easily, but I would like to make a few comments. Thank you very much for those questions. Firstly, in the current engagement, for example, we are asked to calculate how many classrooms would we need to get our classes to 1:30. This is a national question, because there is the perception that COVID-19 can now solve our problems, or we can use that for arguments. The issue is that to get our classes to no kids more than 30, we would need 13,500 classrooms. That means we also need 13,500 teachers just to get to 30 in a class, no more than 30 in a class. Now, the reason we are in that position is because, as Minister Schaefer had said, we're not getting year on year enough money to be able to meet the growth demand in classrooms and in teachers, in infrastructure, in teachers, and then on top of that, resources as well. So we have been boering agteruit, and it's a issue that we've spoken about, engagement over many years with National Treasury. We're not funded adequately for the growth. And the consequence to this is, as I've said often, we now have the worst pupil-teacher ratio in the country. The worst in the country. Not because we are lousy managers and we don't know how to manage it. It's because of the inflow into the province from various sources that is not associated with the money to be able to retain normal ordinary standards. And I've said so in the context of this, there are things that buckle under that strain. The one is our academic performance. The fact that we are still able to maintain the academic performance is just because we really have a brilliant teacher cohort. That's the first thing. The second thing is, the main thing that's going to buckle is teachers. Because our teachers are under the worst strain, then I'm not adding the socio-economic factors such as gangsterism and drug abuse and crime and violence. Schools are microcosms of society, and of course, this impact is very, very obvious and clear. So I also want to say, if I can start at the back, member Christian asked, for example, what are we doing about in East? Now, when we allocate posts, we don't allocate them just equally across everything. We allocate them pro poor. There's a weighting factor in the allocation of posts that weighs more for quintile 1, 2, 3, and partly 4. So the lower the quintile, the higher the weighting, but it doesn't cover adequately. The issue of the principal, also, Member Christian is quite right. It skews the reality on the ground, because we simply take number of appointed educators, state-appointed educators, divided by the number of learners. If we take the principal out, which I do in the post-provisioning exercise to show the real impact, that ratio, which is now a systems ratio, is 1:37, goes over to 1:40. Now, there's nothing that I can do about it unless I get more money to be able to build more schools and appoint more teachers. And so associated with that is the questions that the members ask about the causes of the impact, heart and depression. And first of all, the concern that we've raised over the last number of years, with particularly the last 2 or 3 years, with the escalation of those items, in other words, all the good work that we've done over years in bringing those matters in leave cycles of 3 years, sick leave cycle of 3 years down, is being undone now. And that's because I believe we passed a tipping point in the pressure under which our teachers are working. And that's why we're doing the kinds of things about care, the health and wellness program, employee health and wellness program. We can't force that down teachers' throats, of course. It is the responsibility of our teachers to apply for it and to make use of it. We advertise it, we advocate it, but sometimes something like depression, it's not like heart disease. Heart disease is not a problem. Sometimes people who suffer from depression don't know it until they break, or if they do know it, it's not something that is often openly engaged with. So the causes of these, we do not have evidence. Also, we do not at the moment have the comparative evidence as to how does this in education relate with, say, other areas like health. Well, I can tell you that given the COVID-19, health workers' issues are going to rise dramatically in the next year to 3. But you can't, for example, compare it with lawyers or other professionals because we don't have that data, the increased data. But anecdotally, the socioeconomic conditions, besides the overcrowding of classrooms, the lack of discipline of learners that is growing, the continued social challenges of learners that teachers have to more and more try parenting about because parents are not coping with their own kids. Things such as promiscuity, things such as drug abuse. Those aspects are telling on teachers. And remember, teachers go into the profession because they're caring people. They go in there because they want to nurture, and they actually can't do their job, which is intended to open up the child's brain and develop their thinking and conceptual. Those issues teachers are not doing or struggling to get to it because of the other factors in place. It's I'm actually glad that this matter serves because there are always 2 or 3 ways to look at it. The one way is to look and say the department doesn't know how to manage the space and they're messing up. But the other thing is we don't have enough of a public demand saying the role that society and parents must play in preparing a child to be able to go to school. And I'm not talking about a preschool child, I'm talking about every child, teenagers. You have to prepare them because you've got to teach them manners, you've got to teach them discipline, you've got to teach them order. Those are things that must be taught in the home. It's absent and growing, unfortunately, negatively. So why I raise it in this very important meeting is because I believe that across all the political, social, and societal bodies, religious bodies, NGOs, we have to start really talking about this. And the indicator that we put in the annual report that is but one indicator of the challenges teachers face. This is not spoken about outside the education fraternity alone. And I think it's so important that we start having those conversations across society to address the matters. We want teachers to deliver. I demand that they teach every day. But the fact of the matter is their lives are becoming really difficult. And I think we need to try to collectively address that issue. And then, Chair, the last thing that I want to do, just speak about, and we can try to give you the breakdowns that you asked for, and Leon can speak a little bit more about that issue. I just want to talk about substitute teachers and the impact of that. One of the members asked about what's the impact. Now, we used to give a substitute after 5 days of absenteeism. But because we don't get enough money and because we try to save teaching posts so that the class sizes don't get bigger, we save money on the basket of posts by saying schools can only get a replacement now after 2 weeks of absenteeism. Now, as you correctly asked, what is the impact of that? Well, the impact of that is that for 2 weeks, the kids don't have a teacher. That means either discipline goes to pot, or if the schools are organized, they get a volunteer in to supervise classes. It's something schools ought to do if they are wakker and on the go. Not everyone, I mean, there are so many people unemployed, parents, for example, but it's not easy to get them into volunteer for something. Everyone wants to be paid for everything. And yet the whole reason why we do this is because we haven't got enough money. There isn't enough money. Ideally, I would love to see a system such as in the UK and elsewhere, where we have a pool of substitute teachers that when a teacher's absent today, they phone in, and by 9 o'clock you phone the teacher and say, please go to that school because there's an absenteeism at that school. And so you've got substitute teachers and a group of teachers that go and substitute for a vacancy on the day of absenteeism. And that's what ought to happen, so that there's control and oversight and supervision. Money doesn't allow it. But that's the ideal. So I do want to say that in the COVID-19 space, we're expecting, Chair, significantly increased absenteeism of teachers. First of all, we are planning for significantly expanded numbers who will be ill because they contract the virus. That will take them out for 2 weeks, 3 weeks in some instances, in all probability. We also recognize that there are those that will have to isolate because they've been in contact with another individual that has been confirmed COVID positive. Such an isolation will take people out and they have to get leave. And it's because you don't want to spread the virus, so it's containment, which means not only will ill people be out, but also some people that are in direct contact, not casual contact. There's a definition for direct contact. Such direct contact people means you have to have touched them, hugged them, shaken hands, or lived with them, or something of that nature. Such people will also need substitutes. So in this interim period, we've said that we will look at the possibility of creating or giving a substitute the moment for one of those two reasons a school identifies a vacancy or an illness, an absenteeism. And for those cases, we'll try to put teachers in within a day or two and not wait for the 14-day period. But that means budgets will be under tremendous strain, and it also means that we will have to monitor it carefully, because there will come a time when we have to say that can't happen anymore. There's no more money. We can't either schools get substitutes. We pay substitutes half salary instead of full salaries. We say you work half a day. So we'll have to think out of the box at new solutions to this challenge, because if we want to get at least learning going, we've got to have people in the spaces. Chair, thank you for just allowing me to speak to those issues, because I think they are really critically important. And I don't know whether the Minister wants to answer any of these before she steps out, and then Mr. Eli can deal with the rest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, SG. Minister, can I give you an opportunity now?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Seeing as my HOD is showing his face, I guess I'd better do the same. Not really much, but just to emphasize, I completely agree with what my HOD has said about teachers. We've been saying this for years now, and we cannot carry on like this. Our teachers are under immense pressure. It is showing in the sickness figures. And we simply are not getting sufficient allocation. We get some money for the for growth, but then it's effectively taken away again by the budget cuts that we've seen over the last few years because of the financial situation. And prior to that, we just have not been getting the increased amount we need for the numbers that we are seeing increasing in the province. And it is putting immense pressure on our teaching staff and our principals. Some principals do in fact teach, but certainly not a full load. I mean, we can't expect them to take on a full load, and I know some are doing far more than they should be doing. So we completely agree with those comments and concerns, and we are very concerned about it. It certainly isn't because we don't want to give more teachers. It's simply that we have not been able to. Just on the issue of the ad hoc committee, I know it was publicized on YouTube, so I'm not sure if all your members are aware of that. But perhaps if the legislature could just ensure that members are made aware of when these meetings are going to be broadcast, so that no one has to be left out of them. Thank you, Chair. That's all I need to say.
Thank you, Minister. Members, any follow-ups on the responses that we have received now from the SG? And the Minister?
Chair?
Member
Said,
Said?
Chair? Yeah, man, I've just got, Chair, thank you. I've just got one follow-up. Chair, based on the response of the SG, around the issue of teachers falling ill and those that have got to probably be at home due to COVID, he indicated. To me, it seems, and I know I posed the question in the ad hoc committee, but to me, it seems that whether it's national and the budget, or whether it's in the province, but it seems to me as if the capacity is going to be under a severe strain once the schools reopen. Should there not be, is there a serious consideration then to look at the option of actually cancelling the school year? I'm not saying that they must actually look at it, but I'm saying, is there that consideration at least, because to me it seems as if there's going to be a major strain on the department, and on schools, on the capacity really. Thank you.
Thank you. SG?
Yeah,
Can
thank
I
you.
First,
Yes, please, Minister, go for
Minister?
it.
Sorry, it's just, yes, there is going to be, but at the same time, if we cancel the school year, there'll be also probably the same amount of pressure trying to catch up with the lost workload for the following year, combined with the fact that there will be a new cohort of learners coming into grade 1 or grade R next year. So one way or the other, the system's still going to be under strain. But that is not under consideration at this point at all, because there really is, whilst we take into account all the concerns and are busy frantically preparing and getting the safety precautions in place, there is a very strong feeling that we should save this academic year if at all possible. Obviously, it won't be exactly, as it was planned beforehand. There are steps being taken to cut the curriculum down, so we don't put too much additional pressure on our teachers and our learners. But there is a very strong feeling nationally across the country and in all provinces, as far as I can gather from our discussions, that we do need to save this year as far as we possibly can. Sorry, SG.
No, absolutely, Minister. I don't really have anything to add to that at this time, other than just to say that there are conversations, in the letter that I'm just about to send to schools about the next phases. I am suggesting also that as things go back, there are other options to cancelling. There are options, for example, to use alternate dates, alternate groups, etc. I think that the one thing that I can say is that globally there is the perspective that the learners from disadvantaged communities get worst hit with extended school closures. And so if we really understand that we don't want the reality of the gaps that exist to not only continue, but to be expanded again against the gains we've had over the last number of years at narrowing that, then I believe that we actually have to find everything in our power not to simply cancel the school year. The implications for that is huge, because if you cancel the school year, you're saying everyone must repeat, and if everyone repeats, what happens to the incoming cohort of, in our province, 100,000 learners that come into grade 1? What happens to those? Do you delay them and say we change the school year now perpetually to a year later? That goes against every bit of educational grain. So the issue is let's at the moment the thinking is let's try to do the best, even if we cut the content of curricula as I indicated, and we make sure that the conceptual threads of the conceptual requirements and the competencies and skills required, that we concentrate on that as opposed to content, and in that way amend the curriculum for time that is available. So I'm just going to leave it at that for the moment, Chair.
Thank you very much, SG. And Minister, do we say goodbye to you now?
So at least, Chair, I don't know about the Minister. Minister.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Chair, I can still hang around just to hear what Mr. Eli says, because you've kindly allowed me to do a bit of work in the background as we go along, which is an advantage. And just to explain to members, it's the critical thing of getting correspondence to schools that's really absorbing my time, because that has to happen today. So thank you for that leeway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. May I be excused?
Minister, you may be excused. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Eli,
Yes, Chair.
there are still outstanding responses. Can you continue, sir?
Yes, I will continue I'll start at the beginning, Chair. The question was around leave patterns and whether the operations-related category, whether that is against violence against teachers. Just to say what is done in that category, Chair, there we're talking about limbs, cancers, and gastrointestinals. It's categorized in that particular area, so it's very difficult to say whether that category includes violence against teachers by learners. Then the issue around depression rates that's high in the EPWP space and how that's tracked. I think, Chair, we do. There is categories for, because the service provider has to give us a report. So we do have statistics around that. Not obviously necessarily available for this committee at the moment, but there are data available around that as well. It gives you the various categories of what the service provider is doing and how they are following up in particular cases as well. Just to again note, it is a free service to our employees, but we also find that our employees are not always taking up the offer, and therefore some of our employees also go to private service providers. So we do not have the full spectrum of the data available as well. We only have the data available for our own service provider. Then, Chair, you've asked about the leave patterns per quintile. We will have to obtain that information for the committee and submit as such. I think the HOD has, and the Minister has touched on various other aspects. Then, in terms of Mr. Christian's question around the attendance register and the absenteeism, we submit weekly reports to the district director and sector managers exactly about the patterns of leave at particular schools as well. They get it on a weekly basis, and they can then monitor from there onwards. Mr. Christian's also asked the issue around heart disease. I think it's a very difficult question to respond to, as far as heart disease is concerned. But my understanding is people first, you first become diabetic, and then you develop a cholesterol, and then you develop a heart disease as well. So, it's obviously it's kind of stress related as well. But again, people become diabetic first because of lifestyle, and in my view, it's also diet related as well. I think there's a lot of research around that, generally publicly available again. But I think we have to recognize the fact here that as the biggest employer, the largest employer in the province, we do reflect something in society as well. Not society as a whole, but I think there is a element of what's happening in society and the lifestyle and the lifestyle choices people are making as well in general. Then also the question around Metro East and the high races there as well. Again, as I indicated, it is one of our bigger districts, our larger districts, and it does reflect obviously the particular case, as I try to illustrate, in terms of the population growth and the area of demand. And then also the question was, how do we respond as far as the pass rate is concerned? I know for the grade 10, 11, and 12, we have the high school program or the high school improvement program in place, which we spend quite a bit of money on, to try and assist those learners to deal with the challenges they face in terms of the grades and also with catch up there as well. So that is being managed by the district officers, and again, they put extra tuition together. They are in terms of weekends and after hours, and also they also make available additional tutors for those particular schools in question, especially with the matric learners as well. So that's what we as a department do in that regard. As I said, I think my minister and my HOD has responded to the other questions in various formats as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eli. Anyone want to follow up with the response from Mr. Eli? No? Okay. Members, I'm going to a second round of questions.
Before you go.
Member Said?
No, it's Member Postman. Yeah, I just wanted to say, to
Sorry,
ask
Member
whether,
Postman.
you're very different to Member Said, Chair. I just wanted to ask Mr. Eli if in future it's possible for us to get the data of how many teachers are using the employee wellness service, so we can perhaps do that correlation.
Okay, Mr. Eli?
Yes, that is fine, Chair. We do have the data. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Members, I'm going to a second round of questions now. And I'm going to start up with the second round. Mr. Eli, in terms of teachers and pertaining to substance abuse, now just before we went on lockdown, I just want to know, were there any teachers at the time needing support because of that? And were there any teachers at the time in rehab for that? Then the standing committee went on an oversight in the Eden part of the Eden Karoo district. Now, Tembaletu was one of the primary schools we visited, and then Hillcrest Secondary School. And there were exorbitant large classrooms. At the time, they indicated to us that they have applied to the department for extra posts. I just want to know whether these posts that they have applied for, whether it has been granted. And then with regards to the learners, are there, and how many, if there are, still learners in the queue waiting to be placed in the province schools? Thank you. I'm moving on with the ANC.
Chair, thank you very much, Chair. Just wanted to get a sense. I know that the Minister and the SG have left, but perhaps Mr. Eli can respond. It's somewhat of a follow-up. I'm saying, like, I know that I posed the question about the scrapping of the academic year, and they responded in terms of it's going to be very difficult to ensure that that learners repeat. Now, have they looked at the option? I mean, maybe Mr. Eli can respond. Have they looked at the option of preparing learners during this year for a prep? Basically preparing them for the next grade without them having to possibly write exams. Those are some of the things that that we see in the public discourse. I just wanted to get a sense to that. Then I wanted to get a sense. I've been made aware of certain situations where there are high numbers of teaching staff at schools, admin staff. Where there are high numbers of non-teaching staff and admin staff at schools, as well as teacher assistants, and you find principals and deputy principals getting lots of free periods. And as a result of that, you find that teachers are often burdened and they get burnt out. I wanted to know what measures are put in place to ensure that there's a fair and equal distribution of the workload in our schools. And also, in terms of slide number 8, with regards to the learner growth, can Mr. Eli perhaps give us a breakdown of the numbers in terms of learner growth in the former Model C schools in comparison to the growth in the quintile 1 to 3 schools. I just wanted to get a sense of that, and then linked to the COVID issue. What is the department doing to source additional funds to reduce the teacher-learner ratio and the class sizes? And have they looked at the proposal that we made at the beginning of the year around the former Model C school class sizes perhaps increasing? What's the progress in that regard? Because I think now within the context of COVID, that may be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. EFF. Member Makamba Poicha.
I'm covered, Chair.
Thank you. Member Christians.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, let me just say here from the onset, I am opposed as the ACDP of cancelling the school academic year. I'm opposed to that. I don't think it is in the best interest of our children. We were briefed at the COVID-19 at our committee to say, and the SG and the ministers already said what's going to happen to the 100,000 learners that's going to come to grade 1 or grade R. So I just want to put that point across, Chair, and then just ask maybe this question. I don't know if Mr. Eli can remember, he's been with the department for a long time. What was the circumstances when I was at school? We had an afternoon school. So I just want to know, because people are still talking about if you have a morning school or an afternoon school, I'm talking about social distancing and things like that. Why did we, when I was at primary school, why did the department embark on a afternoon school? If he maybe just can tell us about that, because I'm just thinking about last night when I was speaking to parents, parents were concerned about the social distancing, but I told them a lot of stuff that the protective gear and the mask and all of those type of things, because and I think that communication will go out to the parents. But parents they want their children to stay in school and to go to the next grade. Maybe just a last question, Chair, from my side is. We know that in certain schools, and I mention again the Metro East. How does it look for the Metro East region? Are they going to bring our rate of the province down, or is there enough work being done that they are doing well? I know the last time that we were there was one school that was below 40% pass rate when it comes to matriculants. I can't remember the name, but if Mr. Eli can, just because that's why I'm very concerned about the high ratio teacher-learner ratio in the Metro East, because I know that is one of the regions that brought our percentage down. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Eli, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I'll try and respond as fast as possible, Chair, in the absence of the SG and the Minister. Around the question around substance abuse before the lockdown.
Mr. Eli, just to interrupt, if you are not able to, then we can also just send it as a recommendation to the department posing the question there.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you. Then, Chair, if I can carry on around the question around substance abuse, we had about 4 educators that used the employment wellness program before lockdown for substance abuse, Chair. That's just in terms of the your question. It was actually for addiction as well. It's the same thing. Then there was an issue around, Chair, that you posed around the extra post for that particular school, Chair. We've tried to deal with all requests where possible, because obviously there are various schools that's in various in different situations that we had to provide posts to. But for that particular school, Chair, we will have to give you a separate answer for that. But we've tried to deal with those requests as far as possible is concerned. Yes, Chair, Mr. Lewis is also here. If you can respond to that, we do have still unplaced learners. I think it's in the reason Mr. Lewis can respond to that question around unplaced learners. Can I just ask Mr. Lewis maybe to come in here, Chair?
Chair,
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Lewis. You're so quiet in the background there. We don't even know that you're here.
I'm
Welcome.
listening to the experts and the honourable members, Chair. Just around the unplaced learners, we before lockdown we still had 583 learners unplaced. Lockdown has ceased any efforts to place those learners, and even if schools will open hopefully on the 15th of June, it doesn't mean that those learners will be in a school, because it will depend on the grades that those learners find themselves. Let me quickly see if I can give you a sense. Yeah, and again, most of those learners are in the metropole. In the metropole north, there are 272 learners. In Metro South, there's 99 learners still to be placed. Metro East, there are 93. So it's quite a hectic effort, Chair. So as soon as schools open for principals and SMTs, we have letters ready that we have identified schools, and we will send those letters to schools to request admission for those learners. That's the first step. If the schools refuse, then we have already prepared letters that will be signed by the SG to be sent to the very same schools and request that those learners be taken up, because we have identified the schools on the basis that we have identified possible places for learners that could be accommodated at those schools. If schools still refuse, Chair and members, then we will request the parent to exercise her or his right in terms of the South African Schools Act, and that is to appeal for admission to the office of the provincial minister. So in short, as soon as schools reopen, we will have a renewed effort to place these learners if they are still around. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Eli, are you continuing?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Then I just want to, the next question was around the option of preparing learners for the next grade. Chair, just my request, if you can, as you indicated, that we can put that in writing to the HOD, because that's I'm unfortunately I can't respond to that question.
That's fine, Mr. Eli.
Yeah, thank you. Then the next one was around the high numbers when it comes to non-teaching staff, and where the principal and deputy principal have free periods and there's no equal distribution of workload. I think, Chair, in that regard, the management of the school does lie with the school principal. However, his or her supervisor is the second manager. So I think if there are challenges around that, then obviously that needs to be taken up with the second manager, where there's a perception or there's evidence that school principals and deputies are trying to abuse the system. I think that must be reported to the circuit manager. Then Mr. Sayers also asked a question around learner growth, that he wants to get the learner growth in X-Model C schools and also compared to quintiles 1, 2, and 3. I think, Chair, we will try to obtain that information, but I must also state for a record, X-Model C schools is very different what they used to be in the past compared to Model C schools. Some of these schools have completely changed their demographics or the composition. But again, we will try and see if we can obtain it for the committee. Then, as far as the funding is concerned, I think, Chair, we go through this exercise every year with our MTech engagements with Provincial Treasury. But I think we note the reason why the funding is not coming forth, because I think PT keeps telling us obviously the economic growth in the country is not is problematic. It's not growing what it's supposed to, or ideally, and therefore the funding coming education's way is obviously affected by that particular aspect. Then again, there was a question around formal model C schools increase in class sizes. We were trying to obtain information around that as well, Chair. Mr. Crinsis also spoke about, asked a question around after school. I think he was referring to platooning. That's our terminology. Chair, I think my HOD did speak at the COVID committee around that possibility. Again, my understanding around it, we still require extra teachers for that as well. If schools wants to platoon, we either have to have an option of letting teachers work double shifts, or we will have to get extra teachers to do platooning, because I think it's really unfair for teachers to work the whole day in the first part and then come through in the afternoon to do the second part. I think that will also possibly cause more stress for teachers during this particular period as well. So if I can remember correctly, the HOD did respond to the COVID committee, standing committee on that, around the issue around platooning. It is something we are looking at, but I think we have particular reservations around the practicality of doing platooning in these particular circumstances. Then, as far as the Metro East pass rate is concerned, I think Mr. Christians was referring specifically to high schools. Again, Chair, in terms of process, we engage with those sector managers and also the districts around their particular schools. We look at the reasons for the drop in pass rates. What we do see in some cases is we do have schools, what we call have a yo-yo effect. So those schools, the one year they have a good pass rate, they go above 60%, and the next year they drop below that. And then in that regard, schools have to compile a high school improvement program, and then the district have to monitor that in that regard as well. Again, that's sometimes again, it requires closer intervention by the district office to monitor the performance. And again, the SG with his roadshows that he goes to the districts, he monitors the performance of those particular schools who was underperforming schools in the previous year, and he requests feedback from the sector manager in that particular case and district office, what is happening at those schools, whether we require particular interventions, and there's quite a robust engagement around that particular process as far as whether we're going to make improvement or not, and what the reasons are if we're not, and what needs to be done to correct the situation. So there's quite a robust engagement around that particular program. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, any follow-up questions to that responses?
Chair, thank you very much, Chair. Can I follow up?
Members say you can continue.
Yes, Chair. If I'm not mistaken, and I'm not sure whether I heard correctly, but Mr. Ella indicated that there's no guarantee that the unplaced learners will be placed in schools, even if schools resume on the 15th. Now, that's very worrying, Chair. I want to register that's extremely worrying and disturbing, actually, because we wanted a plan and a blueprint already in February when the department came to the committee. So I just wanted to get a sense as to, is there no way that they can put any special plan in place now to ensure that if we get a report from the department next month or in the next few weeks, we won't get that same response again. And again, I don't want to sound like a stuck record, but we've made the plea that they look in to the former Model C schools. That is why we've made that point, to say that look at the class sizes there. But that's besides the point. There's another point I want to make, Chair. just with regards to the with regards to sick leave, can we get a sense as to, or does the department have a record as to what is the number of learners and teachers that have got underlying illnesses, and how is the department going to manage the absenteeism during COVID-19? And what is the standard procedure that is going to be followed when schools open? And are learners and teachers going to be screened and sanitized at the gate? What's going to be the process? Because again, we got responses in the ad hoc committee on Friday, but I would like, perhaps we can get some more detail today on that. Thank you.
Chair, if I can just ask on that, Chair, member questions?
Continue.
Thank you, Chairperson. If I can just hear from the department, I know Member Sad said now this, but what I want to know is the 583 learners that is unplaced. Is that when did the last learner come to? When did the last application of placement came from a learner? Was it the same amount that we had? And because we were told by the department that all learners will be placed. So that initial learners that were unplaced, were they placed? Is this additional learners or is it the same learners? Because in our committee meeting, the department came and said, we mustn't worry about it. All learners will be placed. So just to elaborate on, is it new learners? Is the others that they promised us, are they all placed? Thank you, Chair.
Member Kama, you want to follow up?
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me first thank you for asking this question because, in the last presentation, the learner growth was on slide 8. And in that presentation, when it comes to the numbers for 2020, it said 2020 projected. But in this updated presentation, that projected has since been removed. Hence, I did not ask the question you are asking because I was under the impression that now this is the final number of the learners that we have. Which comes to the question, Chair, that I once asked: do we have a time frame, like an admissions time frame kind of a model in place where we know as to when is our last date? Because my worry now is that there's an indication from Mr. Lewis that we will send letters. So it looks like it's still going to be another process, and even the stage of the parent appealing with the provincial minister. Now, my question, Chair, is don't we have a time frame of doing all these things so that when finally we have placed the learner, we do not have again a headache of how do we again try to make sure that the learner gets all the teaching that was done in that particular academic year or the time that they've lost. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I echo what was asked. And Mr. Lewis, I also just want to know, of the 583, are there matriculants in this number? And what is the number of matriculants? And then I then take it for granted that because this 583 was not placed, they were not part of the learners who, the rest of our province who could continue with schooling on an e-learning platform. Thank you. That is the cluster of questions.
Chair, thank you. Let me start with your questions, Chair. There are no matriculants in the list of 583. That's the first one. Do they have, if they're still around, have access to the e-learning portal? The answer is yes. The answer is yes, that all learners in the country has got access to our portal, so they can access our lessons, etc. The unplaced learners, whether if schools start on the 1st of June, whether those learners will be placed, I want to confirm the answer is no. And the reason is simply, when schools open on the 1st of June, it's only your grade 7s and your grade 12s that will return to school. The remainder of our learners will be phased in as far back as to the end of August, September, which means that even if we do get a place for these learners, it doesn't mean that they will return to school immediately. That's my explanation for that response that I've given. The question on whether it is new learners or learners that applied for last year, it's a mixture, Chair. There are learners that applied for last year that we couldn't place, and then there were learners that entered the system from January, which are amongst the number of 583. Chair, maybe we should start at the question, why can't we place these learners? Because if we don't resolve that question, then we will run around and not get to the point. The reason why we cannot place these learners timelessly is because we do not have a place in a school. We have too few schools. We do not have enough infrastructure to place these learners. And even if we have infrastructure, then we struggle with the load of the school. In other words, we've got places here and there for schools with a lot of Afrikaans. But the learners on the list, unplaced list, are learners that has a lot of English. So we cannot place those learners there where hulle gaan nie aard in high school, and you are actually deeming the learner for failure if you put an English-speaking learner into an Afrikaans environment. And many of these learners can't even speak properly Afrikaans. You see, we sit with that dilemma. So it's an issue of infrastructure. Now, why don't we have enough infrastructure in the province? We do not have enough infrastructure because we do not have sufficient money to provide the infrastructure. So it all starts with a budgetary problem, which must resolve the infrastructure problem, and only then you can place learners. And it makes it even difficult going into 2021 because of COVID, many or some of the infrastructure budget has been shifted to provide for the needs demanded by the pandemic. So we are sitting even with less money going into the future around the provision of infrastructure. I hope I've responded to all the questions, Chair.
Thank you, you have. I note that Member Kama wanted to ask a follow-up to you in specific, Mr. Lewis.
Fine.
Member Kama?
No, thanks, Chair. It was a follow-up to the question you had asked around if we have any grade 12s. What I wanted to check if do we have any that would that we have been applying for grade 7.
Mr. Lewis,
Thanks,
seeing that they are the cohort that goes to school, back to school first, any grade 7s that we are talking about that are unplaced?
Oh, Chair, I must give you a breakdown of that numbers, Chair. I will request someone to provide the standing committee with those numbers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Eli?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Just the last question by Member Siad around the comorbidities. Just to say, we are in the process of collecting that particular data. And obviously we will collect the data obviously once the learners are also back at school as well. There is the issue around confidentiality, and we've had questions around the access to information. So we will treat that particular information you know, with strict confidence as well, yeah. Then the other issue around that as well, in terms of relating to the comorbidities, is we are currently awaiting a circular from DBE, Department of Basic Education, which spells out which comorbidities it is applicable to, and also the indicators as well. So if you have diabetes, you need to have, for the past 6 months, your sugar level should have been, reading should have been over 7.5 or something like that, chairperson. But it's very specific, but we are waiting that particular direction by the national minister. We are waiting that particular direction from DBE that can spells out exactly what needs to happen. I think the same will then similarly apply to learners as well. And I think my HOD has spoken about that. I'm not sure on Friday at the COVID Standing Committee around that as well. So yeah, Chair, we are collecting that particular data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eli, Mr. Lewis. Members, that was all the questions posed. I'm going to allow for another round if there are burning questions that you need to ask. Nothing?
Chair?
Member Syed?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the responses, the WCD officials. I just wanted to get a sense, maybe I don't expect it right now, but perhaps they could, the department can send us this breakdown in writing. It was said now that there's obviously less money to compensate for the accommodation of learners that are unplaced and that type of thing. I just wanted to get a sense as to what amounts we are looking at. Where was the money that is now meant for COVID spent? If you could just get possibly a financial breakdown maybe given to us as the committee, you know, and I don't expect that to be given to us right now. The other question I wanted to just ask is, can we get a breakdown or at least an idea as to the learner numbers and teaching posts in our former Model C schools? Thank you.
Mr. Eli?
Yeah, Chairperson, just around the funding, we received if we can call it advice and guidelines from DBE that we can utilize the EIG grant, the infrastructure grant, for the purchase of the personal protection equipment. We do not have final figures yet, and we also have to go through a particular adjustment budget process which we will then obviously have to come back to the Standing Committee on. Around that particular aspect as well. So at the moment we are busy procuring it. There are still some procurement we still have to do. So the final costing will only be known later on once we have all the data and we've done and we've gone through all our processes. Then we will be able to do that. But again, Chair, I think at the moment it's premature to say some of those things because I think there's still a process to be had around that as well. But again, and in that particular process, again, Chair, we will obviously share with the committee which particular projects will be affected or not, or where else we got the funding from. Then, as far as the learner educator ratios for ex-Model Cs or former ex-Model C schools are concerned, we will try and extract that information for the member. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eli, for that responses. I'm going to, with that being said, Mr. Eli, Mr. Lewis, you are still with us. Thank you very much for questions that we have had this afternoon. Members, I'm then going to say goodbye to the WCED and I'm going to ask members to remain so that we can do our in-house administration tasks. Mr. Eli, Mr. Lewis, go well and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Members, I'm going to ask our procedural officer just to put our minutes up. Or before we get to that, maybe just around to all members, and you can indicate who you are, any recommendations that you want to do on the presentations or information seeking from the department regarding the presentations that we have had this afternoon.
Chair, Member Christian.
Member Christian, continue.
Chair, I know what Mr. Lewis said now, but I just want to get the indication. As I said, we're sitting with 583 learners that's unplaced, and they promised us, as I mentioned, I don't know where we will get in the minutes, but when they came to brief us, they said that all learners will be placed. And now there's learners from that batch that was not placed. If they can give us maybe just explanation on that, Chairperson, and then maybe just the other thing that is important is I heard this the grade 7s and grade 12s is going back, the 7th and the 12th, and I know we sit on the COVID-19, but if they can just give us a clear indication, they told us that all learners will be safe with the protective care and all of those type of, I'm talking about the mask and all of the stuff. If they can just give us that assurance again that our learners that goes to school, just for the parents that are worried, just that the learners that go to school can, that they are safe when they're at school and the screening that will take place. Maybe just that, just to give some assurance to some mothers and fathers, Chair, and maybe just as he indicated, I spoke a lot about the Metro East. Well, they must please present those plans because I know there's a school that's doing badly there. If they can just give us those plans to help those learners, because I think they're going to need it much. Everybody's going to need it. But I think in the East area, they're going to need a lot of hard work to get those learners to the next level. Thank you, Chair.
Member Christian, I just want to caution on not duplicating in terms of us as education and the ad hoc committee who have handled education. Now, I know that we are still awaiting the report of the WCED in front of the ad hoc committee, and there was an opportunity for us to have requested some information. Can I therefore ask that we wait for that responses first before we request via the standing committee instead of the ad hoc committee? Member Christian.
Chair, what you're referring to, because I'm referring to what I'm referring to is I'm referring to the 200 million that was made available, and they said that they've already gave the answer, the 50 million for mask, that each and every child will get hand sanitizer. They gave the amounts, they gave the breakdown already. What I'm asking, so that information was given to the ad hoc, but what I'm asking is just to assure, because just to assure our parents. So if we have that, information, at least we can run with that information too. Just to when we speak to our constituency and those people, because people, they same with all members, they WhatsApp you, they talk to you, and I would want that assurance in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Member Gillian, anything from your side?
Thank you, Chairperson. For me, it's just if we could have the detailed data from the employee health and wellness system in terms of how many teachers got support from the WCED? And then perhaps if they could also just expand a little bit more about what they mean by operations related and deep dive into what constitutes neurological related, because that's quite a broad category as well.
Okay, thank you. Member Allen?
Thank you, Chairperson. I am covered by Member Bosman. Are we also referring to point 6 now?
We're
Or
referring to the
diverse
whole
and-
presentation if you have recommendations or you seek further information on both presentations.
The one question with regard to the slide patterns in terms of the leaf. I chatted to our procedural officer earlier on and gave the description regarding the breakdown per category, depression, etc., over the different quintiles, if we are able to get that in writing.
That's it for you?
Yes,
you.
Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Said.
No, it's fine, Chair. I'm covered. Yeah, I'm covered by the other members, and I made my requests when they were there as well. So it's
Okay, thank you, Member Kama.
Thank you, Chair. Mine, Chair, I want if we can get the question I was asking in terms of the time frame. So if we can get the admission times frame as to at what point do they stop taking admissions? At what point are they able to say we can't place anymore because of the reasons that Mr. Lewis has provided? So that it's not a whole year process up to the minutes. If we can get what are they guided by in terms of their admissions time frame? Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Member Bakamba Bocha.
Chair, thanks. I'm covered. Just that I still request the department to give us a breakdown of the cases of depression, in terms of the causes, the regions, and also per quintiles in terms of, so that we are in a position to ascertain what are the focus points. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Christians, you are covered, hey?
Chair, just maybe a last thing.
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to more info on this teachers management system. I don't know if it works 100% about teachers being absent, and then it gets to if they can just. I just heard it doesn't work 100%. So if they can just, I don't know, give us something on how it works. The teachers management. When do HQ then get the information? I got reports it's not working 100%. Chairperson, if we can just get some clarity on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend unannounced visits when the grades 7 and 12 restart the school year. With that said, Wasima, can you just give a summary? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Yes, I've captured about a couple. All learners will be placed, we request from the department, all learners will be placed explanation on the 583 that were unplaced, the grade 7s and the grade 12s. Member Christians requested a clear indication from the learners, the safety of them, what will happen in detail. They did get it in the COVID-19, but he wants it in detail. He also wants, regarding the Metro East, a presented plan, how they will help those learners in those areas since the grades are, the percentage is low. Member Bosman wanted a detailed the details on the data on the health and wellness, the support that is given to the teachers, what they mean by the neurological slide and the deep dive. He wanted more information on that. Member Regan Allen wanted the slide patterns on leaf breakdowns per category, per quintiles. Member Sayed wanted the financial breakdown of the unplaced learners during the COVID-19, a time frame for admission able to be guided by, this was another one, the time frame for admission when new learners are admitted into the school. The department said that they are able to place learners, but they are not sure if they're able to place all of the learners. A breakdown of the cases, depressions, causes, and the regions, and the quintiles that they form in. Member Christians wanted teachers, management system, clarity on that, and Member Botha wanted the unannounced visits to those schools that will be opening in June for grade 7s and grade 12s, so we can see what it looks like. Am I missing anything?
Members, you all in
Member
agreement?
Christians.
You all heard it? Member Christians?
Chair, maybe just to make it easier, the Metro East, maybe just the schools under 60%. I don't want everybody, but I just want the people that's doing very bad, under 60%. Thank you, Chair.
Not a problem.
Thank you, member. Members, with that said, can we then take that as our recommendations to the department? Thank you. We are moving on. Wasima, would you put the draft minutes of the 18th of March onto the platform, please?
Okay, just hold 1 second. Are you able to see it?
Yes, we are.
Okay, let's go to the top.
Okay. Okay, you must scroll down. Yeah. Members, just check that that is in order in terms of your attendance.
Can I move to the next page?
You may.
Hi, Regan Allen, Chairperson. Sorry, I didn't note my name on top. I can only see from Member Christians.
Can you see it
I'm
now?
sorted.
You
Thank
are right at the top, member.
Okay, I'm on the second page now.
Yeah.
And that's
Continue.
the end of it.
Okay, members, that is the minutes of the 18th of March. We did the appropriation for vote 5. Can I have an adoption for this minute?
Member Christians.
Member Christians is proposing to adopt. Can I have a seconder for Member Christians?
Regan Allen.
Member Allen. Thank you, members Christians and Allen, for adopting the draft minutes. Members, I'm moving on and I'm getting to the draft program that was circulated by the procedural officer. And I have requested that we look at the content and whether we should. Wasima, you can take the minute off now, it's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. The draft committee program was circulated to members, and we have requested that members look at the draft program and at the content of it, and whether you would want to shift some of the content around to bring it up or to shift it a bit down in terms of the calendar. So I'm taking your input, members.
Chairperson?
Is that Member Gillian?
Yes, it is.
Continue, Member Gillian.
I'm just thinking in light of the changes to our physical situation. Most of us have been locked up in our houses for a while. A lot of this was planned with the intention that we were operating as normal. So a lot of this would be slightly it needs to be adjusted. So can I perhaps propose that the committee gives the chairperson and the procedural officer the authority to readjust the program in light of what is possible, because obviously visits to schools won't be possible under the normal circumstances. So my proposal for now would be that we give you and the procedural officer the space and authority to readjust the program to where it can actually work.
Thank you very much, Member Gillian. Members, there is a proposal by Member Gillian.
Regan Allen here, Chairperson.
Member Allen?
I would support the recommendation made by Gillian Bosman as stipulated earlier. Thank you.
Members? Members.
Yes, Chair, I want to also support that. Recommendation that has been made. I just want to also just advise that possibly when re-looking, let us take into account the COVID focus and the COVID context as well, Chair. Thank you.
Members, yes, on that said, I am very cognizant of the COVID disaster that we are in. I'm very cognizant of the ad hoc committee that was born to look into COVID matters pertaining to education. So I'm very aware of that. And as far as possible, I would not like us to duplicate. However, I would also want to say that there are matters in our draft program and matters that we have looked at and that we have discussed that we thought at the time it is important for us to lay the focus on. So with that said, I'm going to, I will look at this draft program with the procedural officer with that in mind. So anything that can be handled by the ad hoc committee, it will be handled by the ad hoc committee. So thank you for that. Then in terms of Member Makamba Bocha, I just checked that the ITC went to all the members in terms of the ad hoc committee, the establishment of the ad hoc committee at the time. And I also checked that it is only the ad hoc committee members and the alternatives who get the information. However, the information is not, how do I say, the information is not privileged information. So you are, you can get the information as to what is on the agenda for the ad hoc committee. But I will, as far as possible, if there is an education slot in the near future that the ad hoc committee will handle, we will ensure that all members of the Standing Committee of Education, they get the information. So I trust that with that said, that is okay with you.
Noted, true.
Okay, members, then with that said, we have come to the end of our very first Standing Committee meeting on this virtual platform. I wish to say thank you very much for all members who have availed themselves. Also want to say thank you to the media who has followed this presentations and the Standing Committee meeting, and everybody else who has followed this meeting on the or via the YouTube channel. Members, thank you very much. Keep well and go safe. We will have our next meeting on the 19th of May.
Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our procedural officer, Wasima, for all the logistics around making this meeting happen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.